creating beyond calculation, beyond politics, and beyond the big two. Welcome, Silverliners, to the wonderful world of Wednesday Wham. I'm your host, Dean Zachary, and I'm joined tonight by a skeleton crew, appropriately enough. Rob Davis, the paragon of pencils, and Aaron the contrarian Humphreys, also known as the superior skeptic. It seems that we'll be joined later, I'm told, by one of the wizards of wordplay himself, Rory Boyle. Barbara is indisposed, as is Scott. So it's just us, guys, for right now. And we're going to launch into October here with a spooky discussion about monsters and technology and mystery and mysticism. And we've already been commenting on. Calculus says, hey, yo. Hey, Calculus. How are you? Before we get started, I'm just going to set the table here. What I wanted to do with this particular discussion was get into the reasons we like horror comics, horror storytelling, and horror movies later on, and what makes them cool, especially the slightly different takes of a mysterious supernatural fantasy theme versus a science fiction or technical theme. And I'll give you an example as to what I mean. We'll take two vampire movies, for example, Blade, which I'm sure everyone is familiar with, and Dracula. Let's use Bram Stoker's Dracula from the early 90s, just for reference here. Francis Ford Coppola took the classic story and used the sacred weapons and sunlight and silver and so on as ways to defeat the creature, where Blade took a slightly more science fiction take, where there was an allergy to ultraviolet light and to silver. I want to get into that. I want to start with Aaron first, and tell me what do you like about let's say the fantasy approach, and what do you like about the technical approach, and why does each one work in your opinion?
It's funny; both those movies are good. I've always liked Dracula, or the old vampires that had all the power, so they could turn the mist, wolf, bat. They could control animals. There was something about them almost being like demigods,
Yes.
a little bit.
Yes.
Over the years, they've kind of taken that away from vampires. Besides that, they can't be killed except for a stake. They thirst for blood. They took away a lot of those powers. Like, kind of bummed me out. There was a part that I did like when Dracula was more of a unique entity instead of like a race of vampires. Like, there's tons of them. I did like the fact that he's like was made because he made a deal, kind of, I think, with the devil. I can't remember exactly how. Yes, it was because of his love. Right. It was his love, and he made a deal. And I love Blade, the original Blade. The intro of that movie is probably one of, as far as storytelling, one of the best intros to a story or movie, just because it explains everything you need to know about that character in the first 10-15 minutes.
Yeah,
there's just nothing more you really need to know about Blade.
Yeah, really,
when he cuts up when he's like dicing up the blood dance club, it's like that's it. I mean, you've gotten every. Cool. That's the best introduction to that character. That's why when they call, like, we're going to make another Blade movie, I'm like, you're not going to win.
Yeah, there's no way. You've just thought.
Yeah,
it's been done. Let it go.
Okay. Yeah, the sequels are okay, but the original movie, even the way he would film some of the stuff. Tommy's coming on.
Whoa, we have a sighting. We have a sighting. It's Tommy Netflix Floramonte.
Bigfoot.
What's up, man?
Just wanted to jump online. I went bike riding, and then I always wanted to say hello to my Wednesday Wham people as I try to get into a wreck again, like I always do.
No. Well, hello to you. Are you swimming over there? Are you going through some mud puddles and stuff? Or is it all dry?
No, it actually went really well. We the power was out for so I guess it's been a week now, right? So so our power, we were good with power all the way to about 4 or 5 o'clock in the morning on Wednesday, Thursday, right?
Okay.
And then it stayed out till Saturday. So we just got all the good stuff out of the fridge and went to a buddy's house and and we hung out at her house. She had a pool, so we played.
Oh, cool.
Yeah.
Nice. I'm glad to hear you guys are okay. Here comes.
Yeah,
Wow, everybody's showing up. Rory, welcome, my friend.
Hello.
We have an appearance from the Hurricane Ian survivor himself, Tommy Cormonte, and he's checking in with us to tell us he's doing okay. You know, no vampires out there tonight. No werewolves. No Lucaroo. No
Chupacabras.
No chupacabras.
The jackalopes.
Yeah.
Nothing on my side. Just bike riding. Oop, there's a police officer right next to me. Oop.
Oh wow! You got an escort.
Careful, that's when they come out and get you.
Can y'all see the police?
The Popo.
Can you see the police? Oops.
Remember your rules of the road. You know. Whistle past the card. There you go.
Yep.
We're talking about scary stuff. We're talking about fun stuff. We're talking about vampires and werewolves and our favorite comics with those types of monsters in them, and the technical side of the monster versus the mystical side, and all kind of cool stuff. So we're having fun tonight. What's your favorite? While you're on, what's your favorite? You like vampires that are like Dracula, or you like technical vampires like in Blade? What do you like? You like them both?
Me?
Yeah.
Yeah. You know, I don't. I have to pick between the two.
Just curious. Just as
of those two type of vampires, I guess I like my just your traditional vampire, the blood sucking kind of vampire. Because you know, I mean, I like Blade. Blade's kind of, but he's just somebody that needs blood to survive. Is he really a vampire? I guess technically, yes.
Half vampire.
He is.
Oh, he likes Twilight. Look at him.
Calculus, but I mean, the creature from the black flooded street. I like that. Good name. You're the creature from the black flooded street, not the black.
Perfect.
So what was the movie where the people were vampires and they needed blood all the time, but they drove around in the cars that were all blacked out? The windows were black
or something.
You're talking about
you're talking about 30 Days a Night or Near Dark?
No. This is if you're talking about, there was an old movie called. You're talking about this is a really old movie.
No, I think it came out within the past. I know it's the past 20 years for sure. Past 10 years or so. It's relatively new.
We'll have to ask if some people know what it is. What were the vampires
blood,
like?
but they kept the people in like warehouses that they would get the blood from, that kind of thing.
Oh, okay.
I think it's Daybreakers.
Daybreakers.
That was it.
Yeah, good call.
Yeah, I don't think I saw that one.
The Wind.
Pretty good.
They vampires? Those guys are vampires, I guess.
Yeah. I'm with you, man. I like the traditional, spooky, mysterious vampires that that can turn into monsters and mist, and they're scared of daylight. All that stuff. That's fun to me.
Well, there's that modern show, what happens in the shadows, or what we do in the shadows. That is hilarious.
Yeah. Calculus says I lean closer to a sci-fi horror story, but I prefer a mixture.
When it comes to sci-fi, I mean, like some of my favorite horror movies, like Aliens.
Yes.
The original Terminator leans close to horror. But Predator, I like fantasy horror if it's done right, like Dracula. But I think the original Bram Stoker Dracula had such a sense of legend and myth about it. I think that was just cool about it.
Yeah, it was very cool.
I think vampires have kind of become wimps over time.
They have.
My favorite vampires, as far as like the type of vampires I like, was the Lost Boys. That was my favorite type of vampire. They're like punks. They're like antisocial punks. I just
savage.
Love that.
Punk vampire.
Coming of age sort of storytelling. The school age punk. I guess you call them bullies.
Yeah, I did think they died a little too quick at the end. Some of them bit it really fast, but I love the whole. They don't do vampire. I don't want to blame Anne Rice, but there's a little bit of blame.
There's a little blame. Here's a little bit of blame. Hey, a quick trivia for you there, Aaron. Who directed The Lost Boys? Don't look it up.
It was Schumacher.
Excellent. Yes.
It was the same guy, and if I'm not mistaken, wasn't he the same one that did Back to the Future, or am I thinking of somebody else?
No,
I'm
no,
thinking
you're thinking of Batman and Robin.
Oh, okay, Schumacher. Yeah. Did you actually know that I was reading? Apparently, Lost Boys is supposed to be a family movie. It started out as a completely G-rated, completely different movie.
Oh wow!
It was a complete, you'd have to read the script, and then they gave it to Joel Schumacher, and he was like, "Well, let's just go for it." Yeah, that was so. I was like, "What is going on?" I'd have to look it up where I heard that, but it started completely different, and then transformed into what it was.
You know,
and you kind of see that in the movie. It kind of starts off that way, but then,
like this family trip.
Then it takes a really dark turn and doesn't look back.
Right.
Yeah.
Right. What about you, Rob? I hadn't heard from you. Are you a traditional vampire guy or a sci-fi vampire?
I don't have a preference.
Okay.
I mean, I like, if it's a well-told story, it doesn't matter.
Yeah.
Mm-hmm. That's cool.
As long as it's consistent within the movie itself.
Right.
As long as, you start out with, if it's sci-fi, keep the sci-fi elements all the way through.
Mm-hmm.
If it's going to be the supernatural, stick with the supernatural through. Don't bring any midi-chlorians into it.
Yeah.
Do you? I know you remember this, Rob. You guys remember The Night Stalker? Remember that?
Yes,
old series. It was about a reporter, and he was always hunting down monsters. That was his shtick, right?
I don't remember. I remember the real Night Stalker. I watched the documentary. Like, you confused me there. I'm like, I remember him. Yeah.
This was a TV series, kind of a charming, funny thing, but it was meant to be horror.
The Monster of the Week thing.
It was.
Monster of the Week thing.
It was a little campy.
It looked
perfect,
but it was really well done for its day.
Yeah.
And it started out really as I think a movie of the week kind of thing. And it was about a reporter who was always down on his luck, trying to get the good stories, and the editor didn't like him and made fun of him, and he was kind of considered kind of quirky and weird. But he stumbles upon this series of victims that are obviously killed by vampires. He hunts it down. Of course, turns out to be a real vampire. Nobody believes him, even though he tries to get pictures and all that.
And the evidence always vanishes at the end, so he can't prove anything.
But you're always that was a way to get you on his side. So it was a cool concept. Rory, what about you, my friend? A mystical or sci-fi? Talk to me.
More mystical and a bit of a traditionalist. I love sci-fi, don't get me wrong, but when it comes to monsters, I like that the unknown in there.
Yes.
Speaking of traditional, Rory, did you guys like the old Fright Night movie? Not the new remake that was. It was okay.
Old Fright Night, yeah.
Yes.
Yeah. It's funny because you were thinking of traditional monsters, and I was thinking, has there been a modern telling with a more traditional vampire? And that's the only one that jumps to mind right now. I know there's others, but right now, Fright Night was literally what if actual Dracula lived next door to you?
Right.
Yes.
James Woods' Vampires was pretty accurate.
You know what's really funny is reading the making of that film, and if you watch the film, the guy who played the vampire in that movie really wanted to get into his character, and he said what he did is he would eat fruit through the movie. Okay, and his idea was like, well, yeah, because my guy transforms into a fruit bat.
Oh gosh!
And I thought that was like an interesting take. Like he just kind of created this. There was also a prop in there that was like the skeleton bat thing. I think when he dies at the end, that prop was originally built for the original Ghostbusters movie.
Oh,
and I don't think it was used or something, and it was used very sparingly or something, and it ended up in that movie.
Nice.
So I know there's some interesting, little Easter eggs here and there.
Yeah, absolutely right.
The James Woods movies, Vampires.
Oh yeah, spin-off. Vampires was good. The one where they drag him out of the house and stuff.
Yes, I think that's genius because it's so calculated. Like that's what a group of vampire hunters would do, and bring a Catholic priest with them along the way. You know,
right?
Like it all works.
And that was a John Carpenter movie. That was the close. Again, when I watched, I love Carpenter. Like it's funny because I thought it was. I did like that because they buried themselves during the day. I thought that was a cool idea that they would hide on the ground and then pop up at night. I'm like, that's pretty cool. Yeah, that's been years since I've seen that.
What was the one with Willem Dafoe as Nosferatu? It's like a movie about them making a movie.
There's about making Nosferatu, right?
Yeah, they're making a new one now, and the guy who's playing Nosferatu, they want...
Was it called Shadow of the Vampire?
Something like Skarsgård? Yeah. Skarsgård, the guy who played Pennywise, the new Pennywise, he's going to be Nosferatu. I think he'd be good.
Yeah, I think he'll be good. I liked him in American Horror.
Right.
He
Right.
creeped me out with that clown, the It clown. Now,
Yeah,
I thought
good.
when he
Very
did
good.
the eye thing and the lip, I thought that, especially the eye thing, I thought that was CG.
No,
No,
it's
he
his
really
eye.
did. He really can do that. He
Yeah,
did
he
that
can
on a
really
talk show.
do
It's
that
like,
with
no,
the eye.
he relaxed his face, his eyes on. I'm like, okay, that's creepy. Yeah.
What about there's something we haven't talked about, and that is from Dusk Till Dawn. So
that was such a different movie
That was
because it
pretty cool.
starts out as like a crime movie,
yeah,
and then
Two
it
different
flips
movies,
into
wasn't it?
yeah.
Jammed into one.
yeah, yeah.
I did love the fact that I love the very ending of the movie where they pull out and you see that the actual bar is actually at the top of a Mayan temple where all these vampires live.
Yeah.
Like they're these
That was
ancient
great.
Mayan vampires. I thought that was such a cool concept.
Yeah,
Like they were just kind
The
of
whole
like
movie
fake.
was really cool.
Dracula
that was written by
2000.
Yeah.
I don't know if I saw
What
that one, but
what about the HBO show True Blood? That was good vampires.
that actually got good and then got dumb. You know, it's
It
funny. It's
started
one of those
good.
shows that actually I thought it started out
It was
well and then it kind
good.
of.
Yeah.
I didn't like the clicking fangs. I don't know. There's something about it. I don't like the idea of like they can click their fangs in and out. I'm like, come on, you're not Wolverine.
Hey, that was cool. That was cool.
It was a cool image way to do
I
that.
could do that.
I think Aaron said something earlier made sense to me too. It's kind of scarier in a way if you only have one vampire or two rather than like lots and lots of them. 'Cause then it's just like, yeah. I mean, obviously it's scary if you got a lot of them because of the fear factor and not getting away. But there's something creepy about you just know there's one main one and you got to go find it and get rid of it before it wakes up.
And it made it much harder. I mean, what was the original Dracula? They had to not only stake it, but cut its head off and then burn the body.
Cut its head off, burn the body, stuff
but I mean,
its mouth full of garlic, all this stuff.
That was horror. I mean, I still remember the image because Keanu Reeves, I always forget he's in that. I watch him.
Oh, yeah.
He's a baby in that. But when he holds up the little infant baby and feeds it to his brides, that was
terrifying.
That to me is the epitome of like
evil,
like vampires.
Yeah,
I mean,
that's
vampires. They romanticize them, and then you show that image like, no, these guys are like
They're
bloodthirsty
monsters.
monsters.
Yeah.
No matter how suave and debonair they are.
Yeah.
Right.
And when they show him like crawling along the building and stuff, there was a lot of. I love the way they did the shadows. It's funny. I'd have to say, when it comes to vampires, I'm more partial to like Bram Stoker, whatever. I mean, I was a big fan of like Castlevania, the game series.
Sure.
And then one of my favorite vampire stories is a video game series called Legacy of Kain. Which is really well done. And that whole series, you would play a vampire, but he had, in the game you could turn the Mist and like Wolf and Bat. But it was like, but the thing that was really cool about that, it was a fantasy world. And it was like, you eventually get to the end of the game as this vampire, and you could either choose these pillars to either ruin, like stay vampire or something, or to reset the world. And then the sequel was like the idea, like the vampires had decided to, he stayed a vampire, but he like built an army of vampires and killed everyone in the world, in this world. So it's really trippy. So the vampires are technically starving. They'd killed all their food. They haven't given them enough time for the humans to replenish themselves. So you start the game, but the thing that was really interesting is they showed like, since these vampires have lived so many decades, they were evolving. And so you had like spider vampires and like fish vampires who could go in the water, and they started adapting to the weaknesses.
All the different things could be a vampire.
Yeah. It was like, it was really a cool concept.
What about comedy vampires? Like, I'm thinking of that movie.
Dead and Loving It.
You remember that?
Oh God, that was Jim
Love
Carrey.
at First Bite.
Love at First Bite.
Those are they're vampires now. We gotta include them.
Yeah.
Well, then Mel Brooks did. What was the vet? He did the one on Dracula. Mel Brooks. What was it?
Was it Dead and Loving It?
Maybe that was it. Yeah.
Because Love at First Bite was just straight up. I don't think that was Mel Brooks, but that was good. There's also you spoke about things evolving. One thing I loved about the evolution of the vampire story, we started out, with the classic sort of 20th century rules set by Bram Stoker in the late 19th. But as the stories grew, you started to get this heritage thing where the older vampires were more powerful
Yeah.
The younger vampires like had to learn the ropes, so to speak. They weren't as strong.
Well, that's kind of like what it was in True Blood. Remember, the older that they were, the more powerful they were getting.
Right, the older they were. And also, in a lot of storytelling, they look more feral. Like the older they get, the more they look like Nosferatu, right? They lose their hair, they lose their humanoid features, and become literally more monstrous and feral looking, you know, with the long ears and the bald head and the claw-like hands and all that. So I always thought that's kind of neat to sort of give them, I guess you'd call it a hierarchy of class. Right.
There was something that they've done that a few times. I think was interesting. I think the thing is like, and I think maybe Tommy may mention this. When you do a lot of vampires, then they like in Blade. I mean, they're cool, but they kill the vampires off so easily. You know, which I mean that's part of Blade. Okay, but it kind of depowers them where it's like, well, yeah, no one cares about vampires. They're like, they're a dime a dozen.
Right.
That's why when you see Bram Stoker's Dracula, this guy's like, I mean. It's a calculated, and it's a calculated like plan to actually kill this thing.
Yeah.
One of my favorite vampire stories I ever read was by Lovecraft. He did one with these guys was sitting in this basement of this house waiting for this vampire to come back. Yes. What was interesting, it was like where the vampire laid, and I don't think they even show the vampire. It started affecting everything. Like the environment started changing, and I need to read that again. It was such a cool, just the idea of the vampire even in the ground was starting to infect the land and turn everything evil and stuff. It was really a cool concept.
Very cool. Very cool. There's also the war movie genre has entered the vampire realm with obviously the what is it? Underworld films. We've got Underworld Evolution.
I enjoyed those.
Those two I think were the two big ones, the Underworld and Underworld Evolution. What do you guys think of the idea of pitting vampires against werewolves, sort of as a race?
It's one of those things I think it's been done before movies. I mean, there's always been stories and stuff for werewolves and vampires. The one thing I really liked about that movie, which is kind of a thing I've seen it done before, was the fact that the werewolves, being like sort of dogs, were like servants and slaves to the vampires. I thought was a cool thing. That was like like a slave rebellion, and this is why. I go back and forth. I like werewolves when it's a curse, but there was something I love the way they changed in that movie. Like there was one guy that was an African American guy. He had like a very deep voice. He was like one of the main werewolves in the first movie. And when he changed, they showed his like bone structure just start like cracking. There was something the werewolves in that movie were great. They're really, and a lot of them were practical effects too.
Oh yeah. But a lot of that was based on a very successful movie from the early '80s called Howling. And Rob Bottin's makeup for that and his prosthetics for that really set the standard for lycanthropic transformations, because he was on the first ones that didn't just show time-lapse photography with makeup being added. They actually built puppetry that would convulse and the skin would bubble up and you could see the bones moving underneath. There were two movies came out that year, 1981. It was American Werewolf in London.
I love that movie.
Amazing.
Classic.
And both of them did excellent work with showing like sort of a painful transformation where it's like, wow, that would really like not be good. That would not feel good to go through.
American Werewolf in London, I got to see that in Portland, and Baker, I can't remember his first name, came to the film. It was a special
Rick Baker.
And Rick Baker got to come, and we got to ask him questions.
Oh, how cool. That is cool. He's a legend in film. He and Tom Savini and Rob Bottin were the three legends, arguably some of the best horror makeup artists of the 70s.
It was funny because I always ask, like, how did they make the hair grow on that? And it's weird when horror films, when you get the answers, you're like, duh. One was like, well, we put the hair in there and then we pulled it through the arm and then reversed the film.
They reversed the film,
Same thing with the movie The Thing. In the movie The Thing, he gets his arms bitten off, like the chest opens up and bites their arms off. And I was like, how did they do that effect? And finally somebody said, well, we actually knew a guy down at another warehouse that actually had two arms gone. He had prosthetic arms. So we just asked him to fill in for that role. And I'm like, because you didn't think like there's actually somebody there who doesn't have arms.
Simple.
Simple as that. But you think like we went to all, it's like, no, we knew a guy didn't have arms. And so it just worked. And I'm like, that's great. I never would have thought of that. As something that's so simple. Like, he doesn't actually have any arms. So that's how it works.
Well, talking about the humor, I want to mention humor. I think the unparalleled blend of humor into a horror movie, I don't think it's been met very often. And I think American Werewolf in London is set a unique standard because it blended sort of a humorous take of college kids over in Europe, and one gets bitten by a werewolf or whatever. And you get that play back and forth. Is this a horror movie or comedy? And it works on both levels. It's very hard to do.
Wonderfully done.
Yeah, it is. They made a sequel to it, was nowhere near
not
as good.
Not nearly as good. Yeah.
No, and that one just stands by itself. The werewolf in that movie at the end, I absolutely love that thing.
Amazing.
Yeah, really.
And that transformation scene was.
Yeah, they actually made an action figure. NECA made an action figure of that wolf, and I've thought about picking it up just because I love that.
Just because
there's a bar in New York themed after American Werewolf.
Is it called? Because it was
kidding me? Is it called the Slaughtered Lamb?
Slaughtered Lamb.
I think it is. Yes. Yeah, and they have the model werewolf in there.
Really?
That's
it is like satanic symbols on the wall. It's all dark in there. It is amazing.
It's weird because it is a comedy. I mean, I remember when he's trying to get home, he wakes up and he's like grabbing the balloons because he's naked and running around trying to get home. There is like this comedy thing.
It's really funny. His friend dies and comes back as a ghost and like jokes with him the whole time. Like,
I love the
just
couple.
Banters with him.
It was later on he kills two couples, and I love them because they're like, "Hi, how's it going?" They're like super friendly. Like, would you ever mind just killing yourself and ending the curse? It's just because what we do in the shadows. I think I watched the 3 seasons of that so far.
The original one or the newer one?
The newer one. The movie's great too.
Yeah.
The TV series. No, it was the first 2 seasons I watched. I thought they were great.
Yeah, pretty funny.
Hilarious.
They're on the 4th season, aren't they?
Yeah, they're cruising with it.
Yeah.
Calculus mentions, what about Monster on Campus?
I don't know about that one.
I haven't heard of that.
I've never heard of that one.
No.
Is that a movie or a TV show?
He said he actually did ask, wasn't there a Vampire Baywatch spinoff? And I think there was. I was reading that and I'm like,
that's too good.
I think there was. I think there was one with David Hasselhoff. It was very short.
Well, David Hasselhoff is a vampire, isn't he? Because he looks pretty much the same.
He is popular in Germany. Don't forget.
Okay,
don't have.
He's hilarious. They asked him, why did the Germans love your singing? And he's like, I don't know. He didn't have an answer. He's like, I don't know. He's like, they bring out the kit card, they throw me up on stage.
Oh
he
yeah,
made like one
I love
album.
that Knight Rider.
That's so good. That would be funny though. That would be like a good humorous take on it. Vampires. Oh my
God!
It's like in What We Do in the Shadows. They have like the council, and they bring in Blade.
They do. They bring in Blade and they bring in like
Wesley Snipes. Is like, you're not really a vampire. Honorary.
Oh gosh, that's great. That's great. Tell us a little bit about the Japanese takes on it, Aaron. Since you're an anime guy, I mean, what if you were going to recommend some good vampire stuff for people to watch from Japanese anime? I would recommend Blood: The Last Vampire.
Yeah,
that's a classic. Vampire Hunter D is good, and I'm trying to actually think because I'm more sci-fi, anime. There was another.
While you're thinking on it, I'll describe Blood: The Last Vampire is almost like Buffy, the Vampire Slayer. It's about a Japanese girl who hunts vampires. She has special powers, which are explained later, and she dresses like a schoolgirl in, I think it's set in the late 60s on an American air base in Japan. And it's very creepy. You wouldn't think so, but the way it's illustrated, because it's an animated film, they tried to make a live action, but once again, live action doesn't live up to the creepiness and spookiness of the animation. It's really good.
Yeah, there's a horror. I mean, one of the I'm going to say Neon Genesis Evangelion has some horrific scenes. Even though it wasn't about vampires, there was still something about that. Some of the way he drew stuff that was very unsettling. I'm literally just going through anything that has to do with horror. One of my favorite horror comics is the Nocturnals by Dan Burrington.
Yeah, I remember.
Yeah, which he still does from now. He every once in a while he puts something out. He's just a great horror artist in general.
Absolutely.
The Shaman King. I've seen a little bit of the Shaman King. I really like the art. I used to read that Shonen Jump, the Shaman King, and I really liked it.
That's That's very cool. Rory, what about you? Do you have any that you recommend that
Man.
either vampire or werewolf lore, or books or movies, comics?
Well, I am more a fan of werewolves than vampires.
Yeah,
Although I love vampires, but werewolf to me just seems so much more terrifying.
Yeah.
You can't control it.
Yeah.
The best you can do is chain yourself up or lock yourself away.
Right.
Or else you're waking up in the zoo in the wolf pit, you know?
Yeah.
Yeah.
Right.
And what was I going to say? I lost it. Werewolf.
I always
okay.
like the werewolf, and I think you're the same with me with Rory, that when it's more of a curse. I mean, sometimes it's kind of cool when they can turn into like warriors, but there was something about it being
You
a
had
curse.
no control. Yeah.
Yeah,
Yes.
they have no control.
The old gypsy woman was right.
The old
Yeah.
gentleman was right. Yeah.
Oh, that's what I say. In Wisconsin, in Elkhorn, Wisconsin, to this day, there is werewolf sightings.
Yeah,
Oh.
I watched the show. This is the same show. I watched this show, a show about that. It's called like the Beast of something. There's a name for
Bray
it.
Road.
It's
Bray
which one?
Road.
The Bray Road.
Yeah, because it's like only in that specific area.
Mm-hmm.
Like they
It's like
don't.
in a
It
country
doesn't.
block.
Yeah,
It's weird.
I remember there was one guy talking about it. Like he was in a car and he said he had something, like again, a werewolf like running beside him on the car, like it was. And he said he got up to 55 miles an hour and that thing was still pacing him.
Yeah, and it's weird because like 99% of the encounters, it's exhibiting territorial behavior.
Yeah,
that makes sense.
Yeah, it is, and it's. I don't think it's really. I mean, it may have attacked somebody. We don't know, but a lot of people see it like it's either eating animals or whatever.
Roadkill, yeah.
Yeah, but it seems to threaten people to a degree. But I don't remember it really attacking. Like you said, it's more of like get out of my territory sort of thing.
Yeah.
And for all intents and purposes, the way people describe it, it's just a big werewolf. It's really. I watched the show and it was just there was a it was crazy because you hear about those stories. I mean, you hear about like the devil. The classic Jersey Devil, things like this, and they're kind of these weird creatures. But this one really was, for all intents and purposes, was like a big werewolf, and you're like,
the way to describe it, and
and
it's consistent.
Did you guys? I may have missed what you said a minute ago. Did y'all say that you like your werewolf, quote unquote werewolf, to be like the Wolfman werewolf, or do you want him to turn into an actual wolf, or do you want him like the Michael Jackson Thriller?
Good.
I like a hybrid.
So which is it? Because we say werewolf, and it's like, was it a dude with a werewolf mask on, or is it an actual wolf?
They're
I like half wolf.
They're
I like the werewolf.
Okay, Aaron, you go first, Aaron.
Well, I say half wolf. I'm thinking more like your Michael Jackson werewolf kind of guy, rather than a full on wolf.
Like in Werewolf by Night from Marvel.
Yeah.
Wolfman.
Yeah.
He's more human.
Yeah, Lycran or whatever. Lycran? Like, what do they call it?
Lycanthropy.
Lycanthropy, yep.
What do you think?
Yeah, it's a full-on where they change into the animal rather than just the features of the animal,
There's
right?
a few here. I love the werewolves and Underworld. I thought they were just. I love them. The half wolf. That was probably mine. Strange enough, I think if it's going to do into a full wolf, it'd be American Werewolf in London, because the wolf was unnatural looking.
Yeah,
it was, and it was not just a regular wolf. The only other movie, I know that I'm going to get jeered for this, but the only thing I thought was cool in the Twilight series, I actually did like the fact that they turned into huge
I forgot
timber
about the Twilight shows
I
where they
thought
turned
that
into
was a
big
cool
wolves.
idea, that they were just gigantic timber wolves. I'm like,
Did
okay,
did you just say
That's
Twilight?
cool.
Did you?
Twilight, yeah.
Those are vampires.
No.
Oh,
I was hoping we'd go the whole night without bringing that up.
Yeah.
Oh,
that was the only. It was the timber wolves. It was
vampires and werewolves.
I'm kidding.
Well, they were Native Americans, but they could turn into
Yeah.
these. And the way they did them in the movie, they were just gigantic, like 3 times the size of these wolves. I'm like, that. Okay. I didn't. Those movies I ended, but that was cool. I like that.
I actually think Dean is a sparkling vampire.
Oh, thank you.
From Twilight.
I think I sparkle.
Charm.
And there's
He
one
sparkles a
thing.
little bit.
In the right moonlight.
And the one thing I will say,
Yeah.
I do think no more not giving vampires fangs. There's been a few movies now where they don't give them fangs. Look,
Good call.
out of all the prosthetics, you could just go down to your local Halloween store and buy fangs.
Right.
It's really easy. And when they don't do this, I'm
Well-
like, then what do they get? I mean, how's a vampire like he's just gnawing on this person's neck? You know, give me a minute.
The
Gotta get this.
original,
Give me a second.
the original Dracula. There's no fangs in that.
Which
Really?
one?
In the original Dracula with Bela
Lugosi?
Lugosi, you never see fangs.
Isn't that interesting?
So he just hints at it. You know?
I like the Christopher Lee Dracula as they introduced fangs, and then obviously of the newer films, I like Bram Stoker's Dracula because he did all the things that Dracula could do in the book. You know, he could be appear as a giant bat creature, wolf creature. What is he? Mist. He can climb walls inverted.
There was a few. There was gravity. A really cool drawing. Castle Ravenloft for D&D, and this is they've done this before, but there was one of him on this balcony, and it showed him, and this cape was his bat wings.
Oh yeah,
love that idea.
Oh, that's so
cape
cool.
Is the bat wings.
That's
I'm like,
so
okay,
cool.
that's
I want
cool.
to I want to address the werewolf hybrid quickly and say I really like the classic Wolfman idea because I like seeing that struggle where he's mostly human, but he's covered in fur. He's got the clawed hands and like a wolf-ish face.
There's another movie coming out soon.
Yeah, well, there was one in 2010 called The Wolfman, right?
That actually was really well done.
It was actually not a bad movie. I mean, Benicio del Toro played the leading character.
Yes, that's right.
It was a remake of the original Wolfman, which is one of my favorites. And
it's
they did
actually
a
mashup between that and Werewolf of London.
Yeah,
it's got elements of both of those films.
Because I remember they showed the scene where they were trying to put the guy in like one of the surgery rooms, and all the doctors are why he transforms.
Yeah, and they freak out. That's a great scene.
Queen of the Damned was a good movie too.
Wasn't that Anne Rice, or was that something else?
That was still Anne Rice. Anne Rice, but it the way it was interpreted was a little more monstrous because if I recall, the main monster in the film is Akasha, and she's such an ancient evil demonic vampire that when she's unleashed, like nothing can stand in her way, kind of a thing. So she's like this ultimate female Nosferatu kind of creature.
You know, it's funny. I remember, speaking of monsters, switch tactics a little bit. You know, as a kid, the one monster I remember being scared, I always thought was so intriguing, was
Swamp Thing.
Swamp Thing, but the original Medusa, Clash of the Titans.
Oh yeah.
Oh, that's awesome.
Yeah.
Oh,
I love that.
Horrifying.
The new movie, I thought, they're gonna do it, but they've ruined it. What made the original so cool was the fact that she would just move, and then she would shake that rattle.
Yeah,
and
like
it was
a rattle
so
snake.
menacing.
Yeah, to get you to look. And you turn to stone. That
was clever.
Again, that fantasy element. You just look, if they present it as a believable real world, you buy right into it as a believable real thing. It's like, don't look her in the eye, you'll turn to stone. No explanation. No. Well, it shifts the spectrum of light, and the light then turns your molecules into
it just you turn to stone.
I don't want to hear about the midichlorians.
Exactly.
No, it just
I don't want to hear stone. Okay,
there's
no scientific explanation. It's magic. Remember when people had imaginations? Right. Yes, I do.
It's funny because I thought with all the CG and the effects, they'd make that scene like 10 times better. But man, there's certain scenes that even with visual effects, it's just the way you present it. I still watch that scene in which she moves and does the rattle. I'm like, it's still menacing. It's still good.
Calculus brings up a good point. The fact that you guys aren't talking Twilight Grim is disappointing. Well, we're about to do that then. My goodness, Rob. I have been remiss, my friend. It's time for you to talk up Twilight Grim. Give us a little bit of the background for those. I know you have before. For those who may be watching this for the first time.
They're traditional vampires, but it's a whole city full of them. So there's a bunch of them. I kind of agree that the fewer there are, the more horrific they are.
Yeah.
But in this case, there's so many of them that in one scene in issue 4. They crashed the ceiling, or this glass ceiling in the mayor's house, and attack the mayor as he and his daughter are having dinner. And there's just a mass of them coming in, and they're shooting them, and they're still coming. And then, of course, Twilight Grim comes to the rescue, riding his motorcycle, crashing through the window to come in and take them out.
Oh,
And
wow.
then so they're and they can be taken out they can be backed
Repelled
off
with the cross.
with a cross. They can they can be melted with holy water. And there's a scene in issue 3 where they're actually one of Twilight Grimm's minions, when the girl who's the first issue, you kind of follow her into the story, but she drops water balloons full of holy water
Awesome.
on the vampires.
That's some Constantine stuff.
When I read that in RA script, I chuckled and I said, "That's brilliant," and that's exactly what that character would do. Something silly like that, but it takes them out.
Yeah, it does.
So,
yeah.
So
if you remember, in the film Constantine, he actually.
I was going to say that.
Yeah. Holy water into the sprinkler system of the building.
Yeah.
So the whole, and then he lights up the fire alarm, and the whole holy water just
That's so good.
That's
Shia LaBeouf.
I have not seen that. It's on Netflix. I'm going to have.
Oh, it's worth it.
It actually isn't bad. I've read very little Hellblazer. I did read Preacher, but I read very little Hellblazer stuff. So I don't know how well translated, but I did like Constantine for what it was.
Yeah, conceptually they nailed it. Physically, he's not like that. He's supposed to be a very cynical Brit. He's actually our friend Peter Clinton is probably like.
Oh my gosh, that's his Halloween costume.
He was
that's
based on Sting.
Yeah, like Sting. He should be more like Sting, right? Mm-hmm. But just sort of bitter and mad and chain smoker, and he knows all these hexes and how to kill monsters, but he's not a happy guy.
No.
Yeah, I heard that they want to actually make a sequel to that particular movie.
With Keanu Reeves.
He's doing it.
He enjoyed doing it.
I think for what it was, like I said, I thought it was good. And there's been a few movies that I'm not nailed the comic book aesthetic. I mean, Blade was one. I mean, Blade,
that first Blade nailed it.
Yeah,
to me. Just completely nailed it.
Yeah,
Trinity was like a laughing stock.
Yeah, Trinity was pretty bad.
Ryan Reynolds, though.
That's why I'm so surprised they want to make a new Blade. Why bring vampires into Marvel? And I mean, maybe it'll be good. But
Morbius.
That didn't do well, I guess, Rob. You know what? I think might be the angle to go is take it back to Tomb of Dracula and tell it from the vampire hunter's point of view, and make it traditional. Because again, Blade is a more science fiction version of vampires. Take it more the Tomb of Dracula approach, and have these characters just hunting him, and he's leaving a trail of destruction and doing whatever he's doing, and they're following him, trying to chase him. But I wanted to come back to Twilight Grimm for a second.
Yeah.
Tell us a little bit about the main character and his skill set and his motivation, for those who don't know.
Well, we don't really learn what his motivation is. There are clues in the story that I have kind of a vague idea what it is. So it wasn't necessary for my portrayal of the character to know it absolutely. So I didn't even ask RA about it. Okay. But it has something to do. His mother and his family are wrapped up in this somehow. Okay. My suspicion is that the vampires killed his mother, or took her, turned her into a vampire. It's very vague. It doesn't get into the details. But and he's the interesting thing is he's got kind of a love triangle going on, and one of the women in the triangle is a vampire. Oh, so yeah, he's got that going on. There's just all these little pieces that, if this was a regular series that was going to be ongoing, these are all things that could be played with. And I don't know if RA has a plan to continue to do this or not. I'm not going to be available to draw anything like that for a while yet. So I don't. And Roland has some other plans I think he'd like me to do as well. But it's traditional vampires, but it's set in kind of a sci-fi setting, in the fact of there's a super city on one side and this completely dilapidated city where the vampires all live. So and you've got that going on. You've got the dichotomy of you got almost racism in the way that the normals treat the vampires,
Right.
and it's also used as a place to put all the undesirable normals. They throw them over with the vampires and let them try and make their way in that side of the city. And there are still people who are non-vampires on that side, but they're just not. They're. It's a constant battle to stay alive and stay away from the vampires.
The whole thing reminded me of like a horror version of Escape from New York.
Ooh.
It's very It's got some of those elements going for it
because the city's on it. Because it was like
New
York was a city of crime that they quarantined it, and they kind of did the same with the vampires.
and
I mean, the main guy has a mullet, just like Snake Plissken. So there you go.
Calculus says, hoping for a second miniseries or at least an oversized one shot. I'll mention that to our
I could probably fit that in if we wanted to do like a 32-page
or like a one shot.
That maybe as much as a 48-page, but something like that. If Ari wanted to do that, I could probably fit that in between all the other stuff.
Did you have a very detailed description of the character design, or is that yours that you came up with?
R.A. had a description of them. I don't have it handy, and it's been like 2 or 3 years since I did it. He had kind of a description, so I drew something up.
Did he say if Fabio played hockey?
No. What he did say, after I'd already done the initial, I kind of made him. He had some elements from Sandman because he had the spiky hair and all that. And then R.A. said something to me. He emailed me or something and mentioned that Twilight Grim had to have the attitude of a rock star like from The Doors. I'm blanking.
Oh, like Jim Morrison?
Like Jim Morrison. So I went, okay, I'm keeping the costume, but I'm going to change those features to look more like Jim Morrison.
Oh,
I even printed out some pages of different shots of Jim Morrison to use as the basis for the character. It's not a dead-on rendering of it, but he's inspired by Jim Morrison's look, and his whole grim demeanor is kind of goes along with the Jim Morrison's whole persona that he put out as a rock star.
Talk about the weapons a little bit. What is his favorite? What does he like to use more than anything?
Well, he has twin 45 automatics that he uses, and he actually the priest that he works with actually forms the bullets for him, and they're made out. They're made out. They're blessed silver. They're made out. And then he cuts a cross in the top of each one of them. So it's not only is it silver, but it's got the cross.
It's engraved. Okay, so it's a sacred weapon.
Yeah,
okay.
But he also has these twin stiletto like daggers that he uses. And somebody asked me, well, why did you do the knives so thin? Well, because they're not slashing, they're piercing. You're trying to pierce them to kill them, not slash them open. And also, of course, he uses a cross and he uses holy water when he can. But those are traditional vampires that he's battling. And when they get the stuff splashed on them, this misty, smokish like stuff comes up out of them, and they kind of melt and become a pile of ash. So
interesting.
Yeah,
that seems to fit the old-fashioned traditional take.
Very much. That's where I went with it.
You've got a nice dystopian, futuristic environment. So you're blending genres almost. That's cool. Very, very.
Yeah,
cool.
but if I by adding in that Escape from New York, that could be part of the elevator pitch if you were trying to pitch it. I guess.
Yeah.
Movie studio is it's Escape from New York meets Dracula. So
that's very cool.
That's a great.
Good
pitch. I'm glad you came up with that. That's cool.
Where can
just
folks
with the
get
whole
this
city that quarantine with vampires, same concept.
Yeah.
Escape from New York, and I like
And
Escape from LA. A lot of people don't like. I like.
I like it. I like it. I'm with it.
You guys can get your copy of Twilight Grim by going to Indie Planet and ordering it.
IndiePlanet.com. They have a search engine. Just type in Twilight Grim, and it should take you right to all 4 issues.
Absolutely.
Yeah.
Absolutely. So, Rory, you're itching to say something. I can tell.
Go for it,
We'd
man.
be remiss if we didn't bring up Teen Wolf.
That was one of my favorite movies. The original one with Michael J. Fox is one of my favorite movies.
Talk to us about Teen Wolf. What did you
Hugh
like?
Jackman,
what did you not like?
Van Helsing.
And Van Helsing.
Yeah. Great film. I'm very disappointed it didn't do very well at the box office.
I know, it's so fun.
I own it, and it is a great film. The depiction of Dracula in that is incredible.
Yeah, his wives were pretty incredible too.
Yeah. Oh,
I don't think I said that Hugh Jackman is stars as
Van Helsing.
I think I've seen that.
And
they
brought back Kate Beckinsale too from her fame in Underworld, and she plays a character in it as well.
But who was the guy that played the friar? He played not Boromir. Who was his brother?
Oh,
Faramir.
No,
Faramir.
Faramir.
Yeah.
Oh, okay,
yes, he was.
Yeah.
Yes, he was.
And I like it's kind of like a 18th century James Bond kind of thing, because he works for the Vatican and they equip him with like repeating crossbow and all the gadgets.
That's right. Yeah, it's kind of a steampunk.
It's got a steampunk element to it.
Yeah, very
definitely.
much. That kind of
I may have seen bits and pieces of this, but I don't.
It's worth your time. I think you'd like it. It's good.
Like
Why does it smell like wet dog in here?
It's a comic.
Yeah.
The comic book come to life.
Yeah, it is.
There's also the Monster Squad. For those of you who like,
I saw that years ago. It's been so many years, but I know that's such a cult classic to a lot of people.
It's like Lost Boys to a lot of people. There's also, as I mentioned, in the Howling, that was the first time on film in the modern era where we had a werewolf actually increase in size rather than stay the same or get smaller. Those werewolves are huge, and they grow those wolf heads. So what you've got is a sort of enhanced, larger human being, more musculature, more clawed hands, and so on. The sort of dog legs, but you've got the huge wolf head.
It's got John Carradine in it.
Stretches forward, So that was terrifying because the way that the film portrays that first transformation, you don't know what's going to happen, how feral he's going to be. And the werewolf actually holds it together. If I remember, the woman in the film is looking for clues, and she's in, of course, a dark room, right? They're always in a dark room. She's in a dark room, and she's hunting through files, and the werewolf, completely transformed, reaches over with a clawed, furry hand, pulls the exact file she's looking for, and hands it to her. Almost like, is this what you're looking for, lady? Right before I eat you alive, slaughter you. And so there was something really sinister and spooky about the fact that he held it together long enough to just terrify the lady until she turns and sees him, and of course melts into a quivering ball of scare. But I always thought that was kind of a cool thing. So those are like the three that I see in my head. I see the big wolf, the small wolf, and then the hybrid.
Yeah.
So speaking of other horror stuff, because we're talking about monsters or whatever. Does any of you guys fans are like the Hellraiser movie, the original movie, not the sequel?
The original.
I didn't like the sequels as much. Did you guys see the trailer for the new one they're doing?
No.
Yeah, it looks. Is it a reimagining? A reboot?
I guess.
Is that
the Cenobites actually look cool. It's funny. My friend and I were talking about that. We thought the Cenobites looked really cool. We weren't quite a fan of how they were doing the box. And so I liked, and I read the original story. In the original story, there was no box. That was a movie invention.
Okay.
But the box totally works.
It works great. Yeah.
Yeah. I always liked the idea in the original movie that the box was something that you had to seek out. The way they're making it in the new one, it seems like it's almost a tape from like the Ring. Well, like the tape kind of lands in your hand. If you watch it, you have
cursed.
to, if you find the box, you're cursed. But I like the original where it's like the box is well guarded, and only people who want to go to that extreme of pleasure will seek it out. But of course, be careful what you wish for.
Yeah.
Because it was great because in the original movie, after everything's over, like you see the demon thing return the box to its original place.
Yeah.
It's
Yeah. Well, the idea there is, and again, the original story, Clive Barker, it's a short story in the Books of Blood.
The Hellbound Heart.
Yeah. And that the idea of that story was he was seeking and seeking, to the point where he found something he didn't really.
Right. He was this adrenaline junkie, pleasure seeking.
Yeah.
And because, what I always, it's funny because me and my friend also talked about whether the Cenobites, which are always classic monsters.
Yeah.
In one of the movies, they made it that the box transformed into Cenobites. I never liked that. I always liked the idea that these people were other people that had found the box and had done this to themselves. Like over time had mutilated their bodies to the point where now they're these things.
Yes.
That was what I liked about it. And I always, there was a, sort of that I always took it because I was like, well, why because in the original movie Frank escapes, why did the Cenobites want him back? And I just took it as a slave master relationship, not to get into stuff.
That's what I took
once you solve the box, you're their slave, and once you escape, there's like, no, you can't escape, you're the slave.
Yeah.
That's how I took it. So, but the box is classic. It looks like they might do some interesting stuff with the box with CG or whatever.
Yeah.
I don't know. It's on Hulu. I'll watch it. It's free.
Has it been released or is it about?
No, I don't know when it's coming out. I would say in like in a week or two. It's probably like in a month or two.
Okay.
Probably this month.
We had a question too. Calculus says, I'm always a fan of crappy 40s to 60s horror, like Spider versus the World, The Hideous Sun Demon, and It Came from Hell. Yeah, I always like the giant spiders
anything that you
tarantula
watch on MST3K or Rift Tracks is
so much fun.
Amazing.
Yeah, really fun to watch. And because I was a fan of Ray Harryhausen's stop motion animation, which is just, frame by frame animation of these wireframe creatures, and the fact that he would rear project the previously shot live action and then frame by frame advance the models, which were tabletop models, but the patience to do that, the artistry involved, and the simple vision to do that. That's what gave us things like what Aaron talked about earlier with Clash of the Titans. That idea to do it stop motion, and it as weird and clunky as some may find it with today's smooth CG, there's a scary sort of clicking nature to it.
Unnatural.
It's an unnatural movement.
It gives it kind of a creepy.
It does. It's very much like the monster in the Ring that convention that was brought to us from Japan in the early 2000s. It has that feel of, if you're from the spirit world, you move kind of in a herky-jerky way. Well, those Harryhausen models move that way because that was the nature of the technology at the time. Yeah. But it does lend an air of otherworldliness to it. And that's what made Medusa scary to me, was how she moved.
Well, I remember the thing that really nailed that unnatural movement was the original Jacob's Ladder, when they would do a lot of the scenes from that, which was such a classic movie. Have you never seen Jacob's Ladder?
Yes.
No. I'll have to look it up.
Don't look. Don't watch. There's a new one. No. Don't watch the new one. It's it has Tim Robbins in it.
Welcome,
he's
Brent.
good.
Yeah.
Welcome.
It's a fantastic movie. In fact, you know the video game Silent Hill?
Oh, I love it.
Yes.
The whole Silent Hill game is inspired by Jacob's Ladder. The guy who created it said it was a huge inspiration. So yeah.
Speaking of monsters.
Oh, Pyramid Head. I see people cosplay Pyramid Head and they do the stilts and stuff.
Oh yeah.
Brent, welcome, my friend. I take it everyone is safe and sound. Have you had any damage, or everybody's okay? What's your status over there?
We had a little water blowing through the walls, but nothing serious. We just got the fans going. Hopefully that will do the trick.
Good.
And the lake behind our house got a little high, but nothing serious. We had friends kayaking down their streets. So I didn't have
Wow.
Florida.
Florida. Always an adventure, right?
It is.
Yeah. Or at least it's just really wet. I don't. I watched a lot of TV that day, so really I was just like, yeah, wow, this really is impressive. So.
Well, we're having a fun night talking about favorite monsters and the two different takes of classic monsters such as vampires, werewolves, and other creatures. But we're talking about the pros and cons of telling the story as more mystically, supernaturally powered creatures such as Bram Stoker's Dracula versus the more science fiction technical takes such as the approach of vampires and Blade.
It's a virus.
I'd love to get your take on what you think of those two approaches, what you like, what you don't like. If you have, thoughts on that, we love to hear them. What are your thoughts?
Well, the main thing that comes to mind is I like them both if they're good stories.
Yeah, that's
Mhm.
right.
Blade was a ton of fun, and they didn't really have anything mystical in there.
Right.
But at least the first two were fun. And then there came a whole slew of terrible vampire movies where the whole point seemed to be, see, vampires are like us, except they're different.
They sparkle.
Yeah.
Let's just, have them all be really...
They're just misunderstood.
They're just misunderstood.
Which, again... if it's done right, hey, it's all good. And if not, it just seems like
tripe.
Yeah,
Right.
Well, to me, vampires are one of the most overdone monsters. They need more werewolves. There's some other monsters that, like mummies. Let's do mummies.
I was gonna bring that up
or something.
I impulse bought this today.
What?
Fury from the Tomb.
Oh, wow.
So who knows how it's going to be? I'm sure it's over the top.
What scares you about mummies, Rory? They're kind of slow. They're kind of, you can outrun them.
And I had to put thought into that. So they're underrepresented in the monster community.
They are indeed.
So it's the curse aspect.
Okay.
Forever cursed. They possess magical abilities, and I'm thinking like Brendan Fraser, the Mummy. Like
I hear you.
Amazing. Yeah, and you think of Mummy, you think this thing wrapped up in cloth, like, ooh, that's real scary.
Yeah.
But it's like Jason Voorhees, it doesn't stop.
Yeah.
It just keeps coming after you. And everybody involved is cursed.
That's cool.
So if you're affected by him, you have no control.
Okay.
So how do you kill it? That's
so
it's definitely mystical, and you can't make it technical.
Yes, I'm getting a vibe there as you're describing your ideal mummy situation, and I'm thinking less Stephen Sommers, Brendan Fraser style, and I'm thinking more Blair Witch Project, right?
Ooh,
Imagine that kind of take on a mummy story, right? Where they just stumble upon a tomb and they can't find their way out, and something's taking them out one by one, and they don't really see it very often, but that could be terrifying.
There was an old it was a creep show movie or whatever, or something. That was a short story about a mummy. These guys brought the mummy back, and the mummy was killing people, but it actually did the hook thing where it killed somebody by putting the hook up the nose and thinking it was actually starting to do the embalming stuff. And I'm like, okay, that's so it was killing its victims by like one of them saw it like it was killed, but it was sewn up and it was filled with flowers and stuff. I'm like, okay, that's pretty cool. Like it's actually doing the ritual on its victims.
Scary.
Yeah,
that's actually scary.
But
no, good idea.
Dark Side the movie.
Dark Side the movie. Okay, I knew it was one of those anthology movies. Yeah.
It was fun.
Very cool.
So Brent, sorry, go ahead.
No, I was just going to say, Calculus says, what about zombie sci-fi virus or witch doctor? I'm a class, again, with the caveat that Rob and Brent have already established. If it's good storytelling, I'm all for it. Do what you love, do it well. But if you're asking my preference, strawberry or chocolate, I'm going to give you my preference. I prefer magical monsters. So I'd want to go the witch doctor route for zombies, just for me. I don't want to know about how their molecules and their cells regenerate because of some, scientific blah, 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 blah. No, it's just magic. It's just dark.
Don't want to hear about the midi-chlorians.
No midi-chlorians.
That's where I would divulge from you, because what I've learned about like hoodoo and voodoo, it affects one person at a time.
Interesting. Tell us more, Rory.
So hoodoo is this mix of tribalism and Catholicism back in the early days when the missionaries got over there, and they kept some of the ancient pagan practices. And there are still modern accounts of people becoming zombies, losing their will, and they'll like just drop off the map for like 5, 7, 8 years at a time, and then show back up later like totally okay. To their families, thought they were dead, so they had funerals and everything. And they're like, "What happened?" It's like, "I don't remember." And
so like 6, 7 years of life is just gone mentally.
Yeah. And it's a mixture of certain plants and animal glands and being cursed and all that.
This. Yeah,
it's essentially a poison.
You become like a zombie slave to do menial tasks, and you are constantly fed this mixture, this composition, to keep you in that drugged state. So
that's interesting.
It's super. So it would be expensive to maintain a zombie slave, but if it's the virus, one can infect innumerable amounts.
I see. There was an average film made a few decades back now called The Serpent and the Rainbow.
Mm-hmm.
Oh yeah, that was about voodoo.
Yeah. Dean, Jimmy Aiken did an episode on it.
Oh, really?
Yeah.
I'll have to check that out. The Mysterious World. And as I recall, it was about a representative from a pharmaceutical company, and he's sent down to New Orleans to find out, because they're convinced that it's some sort of anesthetic, right? Yeah. And they want to actually get the formula just for, whatever their own purposes. And of course, mayhem ensues and things go wrong, and he gets turned into a zombie, which is kind of cool and spooky.
Well, isn't that true to life? Like if you go for a major surgery and they put you under, they know how much to give you by your weight to put you under. They're not sure how and why it works.
Well, you've heard the horror stories when they first started messing around with anesthesia.
It
would paralyze them, but they could feel everything. That's a horror story.
That's horrible. That happened to my mom.
Did it really?
Yeah, went for dental surgery, and she could feel everything for an hour and a half.
Man, that's awful. Oh,
wow. Yeah.
Really. Not going back to the dentist.
You can't say anything because you're paralyzed.
Right.
Yeah.
That'd be a waking nightmare.
Brush my teeth now again for the 5th time today. I don't ever want to have that done. Wow.
And I'm going back in to have a crown replaced. Thanks.
Think good thoughts. Good thoughts.
Yeah.
Sorry.
Well, something to throw into the monster mix is the fact that each, at least as far as I can tell, each monster has its own kind of, for lack of a better word, a baggage that comes with it, which and either enhances the story or if you take it away, kind of can almost make it bland. Like the whole idea of zombies comes with it the idea of breakdown of society or of being surrounded and unable to escape. But if you take away both of those things, suddenly you've got a strange concept that really just feels bland. Vampires came about because of Dracula, which is this whole huge story of goth romance and death or love that never dies. And, he's got his vampire brides that are like a shade of what real love looks like and all this kind of stuff. But if you take away that aspect, then you just have guys flying around that like blood, and you have to blood else to replace it. So like you got Frankenstein and the whole idea of where man has to know his limits. What happens if he goes beyond? What tragedy can he create?
The original mad scientist story.
Right.
Yeah.
Exactly. And if you take that aspect away, you just have, the $6 million man, which is not really very scary. So
no, and I think which is not mean to interrupt, but like I think you're getting at the idea of tortured souls. Dracula's tortured by love. Frankenstein, Frankenstein's monster was tortured by whether he's alive or not. Like, he's this abomination. So this sort of tortured souls sort of idea mixed in.
That's interesting because that's the theme of something good taken too far.
Yeah.
Which is evil.
Yeah.
Right.
Yeah.
It's interesting you bring that up. That Brent, you touched on something. The complete mythology brought forward around the creature helps sustain not only the atmosphere, but the sense of fear and mystery that helps make it a horror movie. Yeah. So as you're saying, you know, if you bring in vampires, but you take away all the gothic elements and the extra powers and weaknesses, then they just become these sort of bland characters seeking blood, you know, and there's just something distinctly uninteresting and unlikable about watching that. I'd much rather watch something that's very rich in lore and has layered meanings and metaphors that you mentioned as well. So again, I think one of the reasons the vampire myth endures so well is because the foundational material is so well done. And it you know, it touches on the fear of what happens when love and earthly, physical, fleshly indulgence is taken too far. Interestingly, Aaron, the Hellraiser concept you brought up earlier is really Dracula. If you think about it, it's the same thing. The idea of Dracula turning against good because he's so heartbroken and he can't handle life without his greatest love. So he just turns his world upside down and pushes everything too far. Same thing with the riddle box. Same thing with seeking pleasure and pain to the point of where it goes into a madness, a euphoric madness that transforms.
Well, that was like, that was one of the best lines in the original movie, where she asked, like, are you demons? And there was like, demons of some, angels to others, like choose your pleasure, which I just thought was such a, depending on your viewpoint, were your greatest gift or were your worst nightmare. I love that idea. It was such a cool idea.
Yeah, it really was. And it even nodded to Dante's Inferno a bit, where the concept of being torn apart and put back together and torn apart and put back together.
And how far do you want to go? If you're going down levels of hell, it's like, how far do you want to go?
Yeah.
That's sort of
I was just talking Dante with a friend of mine today. That's funny.
It's cool that we're on the same wavelength here.
Did you ever play, strange, did you guys ever see or play the video game Dante's Inferno? It
no.
actually wasn't bad.
They watched the anime that came out.
The anime is based off the game. The game was based. One of the artists who did is one of my favorite artists named Wayne Barlow.
Okay.
Wayne Barlow does sci-fi, but he did 2 books called Inferno, and they're illustrated books. But the way he wrote
pretty
the
cool
books,
looking.
yeah. Have you seen Inferno? Yeah. He creates hell as a sort of scientific hierarchy, like and like a lot of times it's him visiting hell. So there'd be like. There'd be a picture of like a demon he would paint, and then it would be like in a studio, but he would write like this demon was just sitting there letting me paint him. Like so it's supposed to be he visited. But I mean, the way he did, like, I think the greatest horror, they said, like, so what do souls become in hell? Like, one of the main things, like, do you become a brick? I know that sounds weird, but you have to imagine this. Imagine you're a brick in the side of a house, and you're completely conscious, and you can see and sense everything, but you're there for the rest of eternity. That would be the most horrifying thing you can think of.
Yeah, sure.
Yeah,
sure.
And they showed pictures of it. I'm like, okay, so they use souls as building blocks of hell. It was interesting because he would write it like it's hell, good or evil, and it's like, no, it's just this place. And he did a lot of the artwork for the video game Dante's Inferno, and a lot of it was based on his Inferno stuff. So it was pretty cool to see that. But
that is pretty cool. If you study the history, I'm sure you guys have in literature class, you know that Virgil was doing a lot of commentary, right?
It was political commentary, Dante's Inferno. Yeah. It was supposed to be like each politician is going to get its own version of hell.
Yeah.
It's so funny.
But it's very, very visual, the creative visually, and one thing I always remember that I thought was very cool, just from a visual point of view, is the lower you got, it got colder. Yeah. And at the very bottom was this like lake of ice.
Yeah, with Lucifer in it. Yeah,
and Lucifer's like hanging out in this lake of ice.
And he's eating all the traitors of the world.
What?
Yeah.
That's kind of interesting.
The poem is huge. It's like a book.
Oh, it's a book.
It's 3 volumes. Yeah.
Yeah. So
interesting.
The game was fun. It was short, but I mean, it was one of those games they were kind of hinting at. They never made a sequel to it, but it was definitely a fun game. It was one of those things that when somebody finally said we should make a video game with Dante's Inferno, I'm like, well, 12 levels of hell. That's 12 levels. That seems like a no-brainer.
It's like a natural, right?
Yeah. Hey, you got Inferno, Purgatorio, Paradiso. You can keep on expansions.
Calculus says, I want to drink your blood, blah, blah, blah. There needs to be some amount of nuisance. I believe he means nuance, perhaps. No, or maybe he doesn't mean nuisance. I don't know. Nuisance. But yes, again, you have to create a sustainable, believable atmosphere around it. Mm-hmm. And part of that is just quite simply, if you as the creator take it seriously, chances are most viewers and readers will take it just as seriously. Have we left out Creature from the Black Lagoon?
I was gonna throw that in. We got to remake that. We got to claim that.
They got to remake that, dude. Yeah. They got to remake
it's too
that.
Good.
You know, because that's pure science fiction, but it's creepy, right? Mm-hmm. Have a fish dude.
Yeah.
Is he from Atlantis? I believe.
I thought you said from LA.
Yeah. It's a crashed UFO, right? He's a survivor from a crashed UFO.
From the original?
Yeah.
Yeah.
I believe that was the implication. Right. Again, in those days, you could imply something and leave it open. You didn't have to explain with midichlorians. And,
it was like Night of the Living Dead, with Comet.
Okay, here's one for you. This will throw it all crazy. The Birds.
Oh, I love the Birds. Because they never explain why they wouldn't be freaked out. They never do. I love it.
Does the movie, boom, birds kill people. I'm not going to tell you why. There's no midichlorian explanation. They just kill people. You got to survive. Run for your life. And I'm like, brilliant. Brilliant.
And the ending, there's no solution.
Yeah.
The birds are still attacking people.
Right?
It's the counter.
Nothing's fixed.
It's the total opposite of that Shyamalan movie where it was the plants.
The Happening.
Oh, yeah.
The Happening.
What was that?
The Happening, and it was like
The Happening.
The Happening. Yeah, The Happening wasn't happening for me.
Because they actually, how did you figure out that was the case?
The birds were just great because it was. Yeah, it's just classic Hitchcock. I mean, you're trying to find out why.
He's not going to tell you why.
He's not going to tell you why, and you're just like, oh, that's great. You little
there's
punk.
Something so cool about that,
because I remember at the very end, they come out of the building, and all the birds are sitting around. They're waiting for him to attack, and the birds are just chilling.
They're just like, yeah, that's right.
We're all done with whatever we were doing. Yeah.
What was the movie with all the vehicles that came to life?
Maximum Overdrive. It just started killing everyone for no reason.
The RV Jeep was in charge of them all.
Yeah. And you would have weird things. I remember one of the ladies in the beginning was using an electric knife, and it went and attacked her. It was just there was almost like stupid tongue in cheek. It reminded me of another movie. Did you ever see the I think it's 8-Legged Freaks?
Yeah.
Calculus was talking to the 60s spider movies. It was a comedy on that.
Was it shampoo that killed him?
It was, what was it?
It was a shampoo that killed him or something?
Yeah. But it was the thing that was so funny was I remember the spiders would make noise and squeak. Mm-hmm. I remember one of them came out from an explosion and it would kind of crawl and they're like, ee! And it was, and the funniest thing is when they freaked out, they did some really cool stuff when the people freaked out in the mall because their spiders were attacking. They go running out to the car and they start being picked off by the canopy spiders, the ones that pop out of the ground and grab you and pull. I can't remember what they're called.
Oh my god!
Trapdoor.
It was trapdoor. Yeah, it was great. I mean, the whole movie was just stupid, but it was funny.
Still fun. Calculus says you also left out the Invisible Man. I did, and I was going to bring it up this way.
I heard the new movie's really good. I haven't seen the newest Invisible Man movie, but I heard it was actually
Kevin Bacon.
Fun. No, there's a newer one.
The newer one called The Hollow? Was there a Hollow?
The Hollow or something like that. There was a newer one with Invisible Man that was supposed to be really good. The one with Kevin Bacon's great.
That was never scary to me, though. I mean, I get it, right? The whole concept of wouldn't this be weird? Yeah.
Well, you can always be watched.
The scary part to me was in the older film, wasn't the ultimate end of the Invisible Man that he would just never come back? He would just vanish altogether.
Yeah, I think so.
So there was this feeling that there was this urgency of I've got to solve this mystery or I'm going to not exist at all.
Yeah, and he just eventually, I don't think that
just disappear completely. But in Final Destination, the monster is just death by accident. Right?
It's fate. Yeah. Right? You can't cheat fate. That's the whole idea.
How many of those movies came out?
Are they up to Land Before Time now?
6, 7. And the funny thing is they're running some of the death scenes.
Right.
They start running out because like the first one's a few, but there was a few later ones where this guy like had a bunch of acupuncture needles and fell off and stabbed himself with acupuncture needles. Like those aren't really going to do that much damage. I don't know. There's a few where I'm like, okay, you're kind of pushing it a little bit.
I feel a little better actually now.
Yeah. Those needles are like hair thin. I mean, they're not going to do. Yeah.
So I have a question for Brent, because you being a filmmaker yourself. Which monster movie would you want to make? Which would be most fun?
Oh, good question.
Be most fun
for you?
Oh man,
not necessarily for everybody else.
I love ghost stories. Really good.
Okay.
Oh yeah.
They're so fun, and they kind of dovetail really nicely with the whole idea of why are they here? What does it mean that they're here? What does it mean about the afterlife? Are they good? Are they evil? I mean, they're really kind of a blank slate. You can as a storyteller, you can do anything you want with them, and I just love that. And in the movies, you can make them really scary. I mean, there are some tremendously awesome, a ghost story in the hands of a master filmmaker.
Yeah.
It's a beauty to behold.
Or you can make them Bruce Willis.
Yeah, exactly. Well, that's when M. Night Shyamalan proved he was awesome, and then the Howling proved maybe he wasn't.
Maybe not so much.
But
Science was good.
Yeah.
What's your favorite ghost story movie? Do you have one?
And not Ghostbusters.
Not Ghostbusters.
Poltergeist. The Ring. Have you guys seen
The Ring? Yeah.
Oh, yeah.
And I love The Shining. Those are just two really
are good. Stories. There's one you'll really like then, Brent. I'm sure if you haven't seen it, you need to watch it. Came out in 1960, and it was called The Haunting.
Oh, yeah.
Yeah. And what's brilliant about it is you really don't see a whole lot, but it's the reactions, the setting, the sound engineering of the film, even today creeps you out. There's just... There's some pounding and whispering in the film that's just eerie. They had a way to master the way to set an eerie mood in those days because they didn't have a lot of money to spend on special effects. So you had to find ways to make things eerie with lighting and camera and just tone.
And it's still true.
I watched Poltergeist, and that movie still holds up. There was one creature in there, and I figured out it was this two-legged creature was in the hallway. It was towards the very end. She's running to the hallway to get the kids, and there was like this skeleton horse-headed creature. That thing was still, and I watched it again like years later. Like, that thing's still spooky. Yeah, and, as a kid, you think, well, that stuff's not as scary, but that's when I'm like, and they put it in water. That's how they did it. There was a model they dunked in water.
And when
they switched to water, it kind of had this unwavering.
Yeah, that's
just
cool.
Worked perfectly.
I like the haunted house theme, like Haunting of Hill House, Haunted Hill, Betrayal at whatever.
Sure,
those are always classic.
Have you guys seen the Netflix series Haunting of Hill House?
Yeah, that's good.
Yeah.
Oh, I loved it. We're watching it again. I've seen it like 3 or 4 times. So
that's a good one.
It was very good storytelling. It's just the way it ties it together at the end. I love that.
Yep. And what is it about sculptures and statues, guys? What is it?
Doctor Who, don't blink.
Oh, the angels, right?
The angels.
Yeah, the episode called Blink, I believe it's called.
Blink. That's it. Yeah, that's well worth watching.
Okay.
Oh, that is. Yeah, that's a scary.
That's the first time I was actually scared watching Doctor Who.
Well, that's interesting. One of the creepiest scenes in the novel, The Shining, by Stephen King, is that there are topiary animals that if you look at them, they sit still. The moment you turn away or blink or don't look at them, they change position. They're coming toward you.
Oh, that's quantum mechanics.
So these are, like chlorians. So these are actually like lions and tigers and bears. Oh my, I mean, they're creatures of the woods, they're very, I would say feral creatures. But the way he describes them changing positions to turn to attack the main character only when he's looking away. When he turns back to catch them, they're dead still, like they haven't moved.
That's probably where they got the Doctor Who thing from. That makes sense.
It's just something very terrifying. Another thing that's terrifying is we've once again come to the end of an episode that I love doing, and I hate that. But as we
tune in
do,
to Silverline After Dark, where we continue our discussion.
Sometimes we may even have to do a sequel to this since it's October and it's Halloween season. But for now, we're going to use our slogan that we all love to say at the end of an episode. We love to say,
"Make mine Silverline."
Silverline.
I'm Pat Broderick. Make mine Silverline.